This is my CGI recreation of a Varang from the new Avatar. It took me weeks of 3D modeling, motion capture, Unreal Engine, and painstaking work to bring her to life without a Hollywood budget. But it's 2026, couldn't I have just used AI to recreate her instead? Could the result of a simple prompt not only surpass my work, but in fact come to rival the incredible seminal work done for Avatar 3 by some of the world's most talented artists, and do it in seconds without me needing to lift a finger? No, let me explain. Varang isn't just a technological marvel. She's a sadistic leader of the Ash people, a violent and ruthless sorceress who forms an unholy union with Quaritch to hunt down Jake Sully and bring him and his family to justice. She's also 9 feet tall, her eyes are twice as big as those of a normal human, and she's blue. In short, she's just a cool character that could not be brought to life as convincingly by any other means than with computer-generated imagery. Every single part of her was lovingly dreamed up and designed by the writers and artists working on the film, and then brought to life by a talented team of animators at VFX, who translated Una Chaplin's incredible performance into the fierce and terrifying character of a Varang.
Your goddess has no dominion here.
Their response has been overwhelming. Cosplay, fan art, memes, the world has fallen in love with this dark, evil goth cat girl. And then there's Tilly Norwood. You might remember her as Hollywood's first AI actress, who just a few months ago got huge press as news broke that talent agencies were fighting to sign her and was poised to be Hollywood's next darling. The internet went into revolt. Actors fought to save their jobs, but none of it was true. She didn't have any upcoming movies. She wasn't signed on to be in the next Avengers. And the report that talent agencies were interested in signing her was from an unverified claim. I looked into it, even with the help of AI itself, to see if any talent agency in the world, much less a reputable one, had ever signed her. The response: zero. She wasn't and isn't a product of Hollywood. She was simply a tech demo from a generative AI company marketing its AI video generation software. She was engagement bait, and the world fell for it. But honestly, what's the difference? Are both not synthetic, literally computer-generated characters? Why is Varang celebrated while Tilly Norwood has been instantly shut down as an affront to everything good in this world? Before I answer that, let's talk about the technical differences between the two, since I know my parents are watching this and they never know what the hell I'm going on about. The CGI in Avatar and in really all movies is done in very much the same way. Artists create designs that are sculpted, painted, and turned into 3D models, which are then either carefully animated by hand, or in the case of motion capture, puppeteered by the actors who portray the characters, with some help from animators to translate or embellish that data if needed. Generative AI, on the other hand, is fundamentally different. And to be clear, I'm focusing on AI specifically used to create and generate images or content, not conversational tools like ChatGPT, or AI tools that are integrated into art software. I have nothing against generative fill or the remove tool in Photoshop, but it all works the same. A computer algorithm has gone through massive amounts of data, analyzed and learned what different words or phrases tend to look like. It then reverse engineers a new image to match your prompt. So then why couldn't it make Avatar? Well, let's put it to the test. Okay, here I am using Gemini, going to feed it in frames from the Avatar movies, type in my prompt, and boom! No more need for VFX artists. But hold on. This, while definitely impressive, is essentially cheating, as it already had a ton of finished CGI renders to train on. But when they embarked on making this franchise 21 years ago, they didn't have any finished footage, because they hadn't made the movies yet. Pandora, then Avi, Neytiri, and definitely Varang were simply figments of James Cameron's imagination. So how can you train an AI model on a character and concept that is only in your head? Well, you really can't. So here's the real challenge. What if they were starting this franchise today? If we locked James Cameron into a room, took away all his pencils and brushes, and only gave him the ability to prompt, could he pop out a scene from Avatar that could rival the work done by Weta on his own movie? and could that compare to him doing it all with CGI? Well, to find out, I'm going to attempt both workflows, to see not just the strengths and weaknesses of both, but to see if AI can actually make Avatar from scratch. And the first thing we need, like always, is a 3D model. There actually are some decent ones available for download, but that's boring. So instead, I opened up Blender and started sculpting. The most important thing here is always to get the shape and proportions correct. It doesn't matter how detailed your model is if it just looks like a giant blob of clay. This is where I find the right shapes and proportions of the model, and is always my favorite part of the whole process. After about a day's worth of work, I had something I was happy with. Now, last time I recreated Neytiri, I spent weeks turning her from a blob of clay into a fully featured 3D asset ready for animation, and doing that by hand was tough. But this time I can skip a lot of that process by using metahumans. You simply take this chubby base mesh that Unreal provides, wrap it around your sculpt to transfer the shape, then bring it into Unreal, set some parameters, and boom, Varang. Or at least this creepy human version of her. I can then export her out of Unreal and bring her into Substance Painter to make her nice and blue and white and black and red. I modeled her dress, her crown, her skirt, and her knives. Then, by making this braid mesh, making it follow a curve, and arranging these braids on her head, we can get her hair. A bit of film core speculation, but I think part of the reason why they chose to have the Na'vi all have braided hair, apart from the fact that many indigenous cultures do it, is because it makes it a bit less taxing on the computer. Instead of having millions of individual strands the computer needs to simulate, they can just simulate one strand per braid. But that's just a theory. And now that we have our finished model, we first have to figure out which scene we're going to recreate. But just like Pandora, the internet is full of a million things that want to get your personal data, which is why you need Surfshark VPN. Surfshark encrypts your internet connection and helps keep your online activity private, especially when using public Wi-Fi like in cafes, airports, or hotels. Maybe you're James Cameron sitting in a coffee shop writing the next 10 Avatar movies. You're not going to want those scripts floating around the public Wi-Fi network. So with Surfshark turned on, those scripts and your personal data become invisible and secure. But without a doubt, my favorite thing to use it for is to watch more movies. Spoiler alert, later on in the video, I'm going to talk about the 2007 movie Beowulf, which is not available on any streaming services in my home country. So how can I watch it? Well, if I change my country to the US, boom, just save myself $5. Sorry, Bobby. And it's not just a VPN, it also includes an antivirus to not only keep your data safe, but to keep your entire computer and devices secure from any online attacks. So stop running around the internet without any protection. Go to surfshark.com/filmcore or use my code FILMCORE at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. But I wanted the scene that we recreate to be one that really shows why Avatar worked where others failed. Many of its detractors have described Avatar as essentially a really cool tech demo, and that's not entirely unfounded, considering the first movie was literally dreamed up to further the competitive edge of Cameron's burgeoning visual effects company. But I also don't think it's fair. You see, James Cameron wasn't the only one exploring performance capture and virtual filmmaking in the 2000s. Robert Zemeckis, another legendary filmmaker, was also making his own virtual production trilogy. And while I still haven't seen A Christmas Carol, the first two are actually pretty solid. However, even if I like these movies, and it's cool to see how close the tech came at the time to creating digital humans, I can't help but think not only about why these movies needed to be fully digital, but also whether I'd prefer them if they weren't. What is the purpose of creating a photorealistic Angelina Jolie when they could have just filmed her for real? What is the purpose of having countless animators and technicians translate every nuance of a Jim Carrey performance into a perfect digital clone when they could have just turned the cameras on? The real answer is because filmmaking is complicated, expensive, and slow. And there is a certain freedom in being able to do all the time-consuming stuff like lighting, camera setup, set building, or even makeup after the fact in an air-conditioned studio. And that's what Robert Zemeckis found so attractive. But as good as the stories and films were, the digital clones just didn't click with audiences, and we quietly stopped seeing these types of movies. But with Avatar, you cannot ask these same questions. The Na'vi were specifically written and designed to deviate far enough from human anatomy and physiology that they really couldn't be played by just actors in costumes. Their large expressive eyes, which are on a face that needs to convey every emotion a talented actor can conjure, their long, lithe bodies, and their blue skin are all things that couldn't be achieved with traditional prosthetics and makeup. The fact is, the filmmakers needed this technology to realistically and authentically tell these stories, and the audience bought it. Which is why I think that describing Avatar as just a tech demo is so unfair. James Cameron didn't want to show the world what the technology could do or make. He wanted to show what the artists could do with it. So, while there are some awesome action-packed scenes in the film, there was no scene I wanted to recreate more than this one.
What do I want?
What you've never had.
It's so awesome. It's this unholy pairing and bond between these two toxic warmongers. You have Quaritch, who the whole time you think is in danger, comes to get the upper hand in the interaction by knowing exactly what his girl wants and offering it to her. Lads, take notes. Not only is it a superbly written scene, but the score, which I do think has been underwhelming compared to the originals, might be at its strongest here, as it slowly creeps in and changes the whole tone of the scene. Coupled with the performances and direction, it's by far the strongest scene in the whole movie, and my personal favorite. It's just really great cinema. And just remember, nothing you see here was photographed, it's all digital. So, how are we going to recreate it? Well, first, we have to put some motion into our 9-foot-tall alien goth cat girl. And for that, just like the filmmakers, we're going to turn to motion capture. But why? Because keyframe animation is hard. No, but why did James Cameron want to use motion capture in the first place? Well, I think it's simple. He didn't want to make an animated movie. He wanted to work the way he was used to, by casting actors, directing them, and letting them embody and drive the movie's performances. This also allowed the actors to bring in their own idiosyncrasies to the table. Zoe Saldana is left-handed, and since she was the main Na'vi, they allowed her to establish many of the species' traits, like left-handedness and the accent, which the other Na'vi actors had to mimic. Because actors are not just there to say lines, they're also there to contribute and shape the performances into something that feels authentic. So to do that, I grabbed my motion capture suit, but I didn't think I was quite right for the role, despite my great audition. My name is Filmcore, and I'm auditioning for the role of Varang. Your goddess has no dominion here. Next! So instead, I reached out to Paige, who's a much better fit to play our Varang. And so, equipped with my TV remote to double as her dagger and an iPhone for the facial motion capture, we captured Avatar 3. Or at least this little scene. Once we had our scenes fully captured, I could bring all this data into Blender and do the retargeting, which always looks funky, so I need to fix it up. Once I had something I was happy with, I could export everything back into Unreal. I applied it to my model, shrunk the pinky fingers to make them disappear, and then brought in our iPhone footage. After a lot of processing, Unreal is able to extract a performance, which didn't look that great. I think the helmet was way too low. Now I know for next time. But it was still usable. I just had to fix up some keys with a control rig. I could then put these two pieces together and we had our finished performance. I was then able to transfer in the clothing and the hair, which was probably the biggest challenge in this video because the export did not want to cooperate and the hair kept glitching. I'm still not too sure why. I then got my camera movements locked down and began building the scenes. One thing I thought was clever were the holes in the tent. I simply added a mesh with a transparent material that had illuminated dots. This allowed me to simulate small holes and tears in the fabric without having to spend hours remodeling and retexturing the assets I had. Now, what I'm doing is obviously a facsimile of the original scene, as I try to kitbash something that resembles the original and feels right. But this isn't what the filmmakers did for their movie. Every single item was thoughtfully designed and fabricated bespoke by the designers and Weta Workshop. This ensured not only that the actors could get a better idea of what they were supposed to be reacting to and acting with, but also helped all the CG artists, as these items could be scanned into the computer, reference and match as closely as possible. Just as with the actors, all these artists brought in their own expertise, craftsmanship, and ability to create a culture that didn't exist. And while subtle, this is what makes the Na'vi and the world of Pandora feel so real, captivating, and authentic. But Varang isn't enough. We need the man with my dream physique. So I jumped back into Blender, grabbed the metahuman base mesh, and sculpted Quaritch. I could then create a new metahuman, re-export the Varang textures without any of the makeup, and got our Colonel Miles Quaritch. I then dropped him into the scene, animated him sitting idly, added a smoke simulation, and we had our finished sequence. I could then hit render and brought it into After Effects for post-processing. I used After Effects Juice to drop in fire and a lot of elements. Check out my affiliate link in the description below. Now, if you notice, we didn't do any facial motion capture for Quaritch, nor did we render out any of his shots. And that's because it is now time to cross over to the dark side and make Quaritch with AI. And this is where I'll try to answer one of my biggest questions regarding AI art. Who is this for? When CG broke into the scene with Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park, Hollywood and filmmakers ran to adopt it, dusting off old scripts and ideas they had been told were impossible to do before. In fact, the early use of CG was simply one of problem solving. Both the liquid metal Terminator and fully believable dinosaurs were effects that no one in Hollywood really knew how to achieve with the tools available at the time. In both cases, ILM stepped in and changed cinema. But with generative AI, it wasn't created by artists. It was created by computer scientists trying to see if a computer could generate an image or video on its own. And while it had a rocky start, the quality of the output today is undeniable. So why are artists not just hesitant to use it, but are instead flat out rejecting it? Well, while I don't want to be the arbiter of what is and isn't art, I do think that AI image generation is so fundamentally different from any artistic process that it's hard to consider it art. You see, art has always been more or less a linear pipeline of intention or meaning put through artistic craft, resulting in a finished output. Those two conditions had to be present to produce something we would regard as art. Intention alone without craft doesn't create anything. Craft with little to no intention or meaning is mere study or practice, and a beautiful output without intention or craft isn't art. Any artistic output required some level of artistic craft, even if amateur, to be art. Until AI came along. For the first time in history, so-called art can be created without any artistic skill or craft. It is creation on demand. But a prompter has much more in common with a commissioner or patron. So how can we consider what they generate to be art? The Medicis were responsible for some of history's masterpieces. Without them, the Renaissance wouldn't have happened. Perspective wouldn't have been rediscovered. But would we call them artists? Or do we reserve that title for the people who actually sculpted, painted, and created these masterpieces? But with AI, the words and names of these things become placeholders. And AI art has no artist. It is a computer algorithm's mathematical prediction of what art looks like. It's a facsimile. An AI painting doesn't use any paint or brushes. An AI drawing didn't draw anything. An AI animation was not animated. The verbs themselves have been stripped from the final product. And I think that's why we've seen such a negative reaction to it. Not only does it seem like a hollow replacement, but this low cost of entry means that anything can be created by anyone. And the advantages AI gives, great speed and convenience, are typically antithetical to quality. It's why AI slop is not just so prevalent, but in a way the default of what is typically created by AI. But let's see what we can make with it. The first thing we need is to generate a design, since the official ones were created by the artist of the movie, and this needs to be a 100% AI creation. But I also don't want this to be a test of my prompting skills. So I went into ChatGPT, fed it a bunch of Quaritch images, and told it to give me the best design prompt as if Avatar or Quaritch didn't exist. I could then take that prompt, bring it into Google Gemini, and get my design. It was then a back and forth until I had something I was happy with. Once I had my final design, I jumped into Hexfield AI and generated my first frame. I could then use this to generate my video, and it looks pretty good. However, I do think that the second AI took him a bit away from that initial off-brand design that I liked. Because it's all mathematical predictions, it offers very little control. Let's remember, these tools were made neither by artists nor for artists. But I was able to get all of my generated videos and brought them into my edit. I added some sound effects, some music, and had our final video. But before we get to the final clip, I'm not going to lie, the AI is impressive to say the least, and while I personally found the AI tools to be deeply unintuitive and uncontrollable, I'm willing to accept that it looks better in many ways than my amateur work. And that's deeply disheartening. I feel like I lost to AI. So is that it? Will generative AI make artists and filmmakers go the way of the dodo? Well, this isn't the first time a computer has come to rival human skill. In 1997, while James Cameron was deep in production hell of Titanic, another battle was taking place very far away from Hollywood. In New York City, the previously unrivaled chess champion of the world, Garry Kasparov, went up against IBM's Deep Blue supercomputer in a chess match. It was a spectacle, the best chess player in history versus one of the world's first supercomputers. While much can be said about the match, the result was definitive. Kasparov was defeated, and computers would only get more powerful.
Can you beat your phone at the highest level?
No, no chance.
Is that crazy?
But despite what many predicted, that wasn't the end of chess. Quite the opposite. In fact, chess is probably at its most popular now, almost 30 years after this event. But why? Well, it's simple. Because it's fun. And that's the main problem with AI. While it can replicate and mimic the final output, it cannot replicate or mimic the creative process. And when you eliminate the creative aspect, creation isn't fun. And that's why I don't think Avatar could have been created by AI. It is the product of loving, talented artists applying their craft to masterfully create a world and tell a story that requires their artistry. But if James Cameron had to prompt the first movie, much less the trilogy, alone at his computer, not only do I think the output would pale in comparison, but I honestly doubt if anything would have been created, because the challenge and fun of the process would have been lost. I made this video simply because I watched Avatar 3 and wanted to make a model of Turuk. That thing is so cool. But there are 3D model generators out there. I could have turned out a model in a few minutes. Or even easier, I could have downloaded one. But that's boring. I genuinely think modeling is fun, and I wanted to challenge myself to make Varang. And I love having a product that is a testament to my hard work, effort, and talent. I cannot be proud of an image I prompted. How could I? I didn't make it. And I think an audience intuitively understands this. Why would they want to experience or consume something that somebody couldn't bother to make themselves? But I'll let you decide. With that said, and with everything else out of the way, here is my CGI versus AI version of Avatar Fire and Ash.
What do I want?
What you've never had. An equal. You want to produce the most compelling art you can think of, yeah? I'll make the designs for you. I'll make your drawings and your models. You won't have to lift a finger. Just type in your prompt, and what you want to see will materialize right before you. That's the real magic. People around the world won't even be able to tell the difference. You want to survive the future? You need me.
I don't.
stupid.
Now guys, there's a lot more to say about AI. I didn't get into the environmental factors or the questionable way it's trained and created or the many different ways I'm sure it's being abused. But I also don't want to be 100% negative about AI. I do think while it is seldom, there are some genuinely creative uses of it that couldn't have been made with other existing tools. And once the dust settles, I do think solo artists will be able to find a place for AI as a tool. For example, I needed a character sheet to start sculpting. Instead of spending an hour or less of drawing, I outsourced the task to Gemini. Economic realities always catch up, and sometimes it just makes sense to turn over specific tasks to automated tools, especially in a world where artists are struggling to get by. But I don't want to bore you guys. This video could have easily been over 2 hours long to cover all my thoughts around AI. Anyways, let me know which version you guys prefer. Like, comment, and subscribe, and check out this video where I recreated Neytiri from scratch. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed that video. I'll see you again very soon.